I'm Brian Freise alongside Laura Duncan, and you're listening to the Triggered and True podcast. This is a podcast that's all about you, discovering you, going back for you, being with you. You're more than the pain you've experienced, the behaviors you're expressing, and the thoughts that run through your head. Together, we will find your true self, which has always been with you. It's just been covered up. Tune in as we show you how to feel your pain, get comfort, and go play as you return to you. It's time to transform from triggered to true. Hello, Laura. How are you doing today?
Good. How are you doing, Brian?
I'm good. We were talking a little bit beforehand, and I realized we never greeted each other today. So
we did. We just jumped right in.
Yeah, we just
not very compassionate.
Yeah, we just plowed right into business.
Yeah.
Well, if anybody knows, if there's anybody listening that knows both Laura and I, you know that I am definitely the one down to business all the time, and yes. Laura is not so much.
Let's just talk about some things first. But I can stay on task.
Yeah, but we make a good partnership that way. So yeah. We both have grown, I think, right?
I think so. Yeah,
I know I have.
I have too, though. You've helped me be a little bit more disciplined, a little bit more focused, a little bit more structured, and I really appreciate that.
Yeah, that is cool. That is cool how we both have been able to help each other in the areas where we're not as strong. So, and so today we're going to be addressing some misconceptions associated with the compassion method and just associated with some of the things that Laura teaches. Yeah. And so we're going to kind of dive right in. And the first one that I get when I am talking to people that are in very hopeless situations or they're very, very, very triggered is that they feel like there's just no hope for them. Like their situation is of such a circumstance or uniqueness that, that might work for the next dude, but that's not going to work for me. The mess I created is too big.
Exactly. What you've done or what's been done to you is too big to be able to heal from.
And I think that, why don't you just start off kind of speaking to that?
Yeah, it definitely can feel like that at times, especially the more severe trauma we've experienced. It can definitely start feeling like, will I be able to heal? And one of the things that I always come back to is that who we were created to be will always be who we are. Whatever we've done or whatever's been done to us only covers up who we are. So if we can come back to who we are, that's actually what's going to help us lead us through the hopeless situation. Because so much of the time, the hopelessness becomes the focus. So we focus so much on the hopelessness of it or whatever's happened to us or whatever we've done that we lose sight of who we are in the midst of what's happened to us.
Yeah, and I think that's a very important thing. When I was kind of going through my part of it is I definitely felt like, I'm very much on an island. And when I started working through this process is when I had my first glimmers of hope.
Yeah.
And that's when I knew that, okay, I won't be here forever.
Yeah.
And
yeah, that's one of the big things that comes from the hopelessness. We feel like it's going to last forever. I'm going to be here forever and there's no way out. And it does feel very lonely because you're trapped within your own story, feeling like there's no way out of it.
Yeah. Yeah. Very stuck. Very stuck. So as you think about people that you've encountered through the years, I know you've had people that have had great, you've seen great breakthrough quickly. You've had others that it took a long time. So just kind of speak to that.
Yeah. We're so insistent, especially in our society. I think our Western culture is so instant gratification. We have a really hard time with delayed gratification. And so when something doesn't happen right away, we conclude it doesn't work or like we just talked about, or it's too, I'm too far gone, or whatever's happened is too much. But being able to recognize that time is actually an opportunity to be able to love, to be able to be with ourselves in it. So as soon as we put that clock on our healing, or, and connected to the hopelessness as well, with that clock on that healing, we're not able to actually be patient with ourselves, take the time that we need, and have the space that we need to get the comfort that we're looking for in our pain. And so being able to take that clock, put it aside, and just say, take all the time you need. That's one of the popular compassion phrases is take all the time you need. And if you think about it, like when you go back to early childhood development, there's so much of a rush there, you know, and that rush creates anxiety, creates pressure, creates expectation. So if all the way back to our early childhood development, we've got this clock on us to be better. So I would take it even a step further than just take all the time you need, put the clock away, and say, in early childhood development, where did you feel like you had to hurry up and get better? Where did you feel like you couldn't take the time you needed and the space you needed to feel what you needed to feel?
Hmm. As I think through when I, kind of went through my journey, one of the things that really hit me was the I felt I was very unique in the standpoint of having this emotional pain. Like I felt like, I shouldn't have this. Others don't
Mm-hmm.
have this. Others
Yeah.
don't have this problem.
Yeah.
But what's really cool as I've engaged this more and more is how I recognize this is such a shared part of humanity. Like
Yeah.
all of us.
Yeah.
And then I didn't feel so weird
Mm-hmm.
or alone. And I recognized the way other people mask it. I
Yeah.
recognized how I masked it and I would recognize how
Mm-hmm.
other people did. And all of a sudden I felt that really helped me in the area of shame too, because I had so much
Yes.
shame,
Yeah. Because
so much
we
shame.
think we are too far gone and whatever it is. And so and not only does it feel like whatever we did is too far gone, but that who we are is too far gone. And that coming back to the being with is the shared experience, like you're talking about. If we can recognize that every single human has pain, every single human feels alone in their pain until they have the space to be able to recognize logically everyone has pain, but emotionally we can have a shared experience because even if your circumstances are different than mine, we have the same emotions, we have the same
Exactly.
feelings.
Yeah.
And I would even say that male and female too. How we express our emotions, how we process our emotions may be different, but every human, male or female, every race, every nationality, everyone feels pain and needs comfort.
Everyone's been scared.
Yep, every single human, scared, sad, lonely.
Where we kind of get ourselves in trouble is when we start comparing, well, you were
Mm-hmm.
scared for that reason.
Yes, exactly.
And it doesn't really matter the
No,
reason.
and it
Scared
creates
is
such
scared.
isolation. Yeah, it
Yeah.
creates such isolation because when we measure what's happened to us or what we've done, we actually disconnect and isolate because we feel like that uniqueness of what happened to us is actually a cause for disconnection.
So what I would do for myself is I would minimize what I was feeling because I was feeling like, well, other people have gone through worse things. This shouldn't bother
Yes.
me.
Yep.
And that was such a, that's probably another
And
big misconception
yeah,
of this stuff. They're like,
exactly.
I grew up in a good home, blah, blah, blah. I shouldn't
Oh,
feel
that's
so.
such a common misconception, that we shouldn't feel the way we feel because it's not as bad as what other people experience. But your reality is your reality and how it impacted you. It sounds weird to say, but sometimes the things that are smaller can be as painful or even more painful because of lack and unmet need
Well, that
than
and you
even a
bury it for
person's.
longer.
Exactly, because there's no justify, like you can't justify needing the same comfort as someone that's had a very severe traumatic situation.
And the longer you bury it, the worse it gets.
Yes, exactly. That suppression just keeps it building and that belief system keeps building. So as soon as, the pain comes up, we suppress it back down with it's not that bad.
Hmm. Yeah.
Yeah, I found that a lot, especially in the Christian world of people that didn't have, excuse me, very like strong traumatic events happen in their life, but they had severe emotional lack. And trying to justify that always comes out as like, well, I wasn't abused, but I also never felt like anyone ever saw me or heard me. And trying to help people understand that those are both very traumatic.
I mean, I think the bottom line is that it doesn't matter who you are or where you've been, you've taken
Yeah,
hits. And
exactly.
there's no sense trying to measure how,
No.
my hit was worse than your hit and all that other
No.
stuff. It's like we've all taken hits. We
Yeah.
all benefit from this process.
Yes,
We
exactly. No
all
matter how
need to
big or
engage.
small.
Yeah, we all need to engage this process or something along these lines to take care of those hits that we've taken in our
Yeah.
heart.
Yeah.
Absolutely. So, one of the other misconceptions that people have, and this one's a pretty big trigger for people, and it's probably one of the bigger ones. And you talk a lot about, focusing on yourself, and you say some things about, there's no victims and there's no villains.
Yeah.
And one of the big misconceptions is people have by saying that is you're like, what do you mean? What that person did didn't, that person hurt me. Doesn't that matter? Um,
Hmm.
they need to be held accountable. We need to focus on that. And so just kind of address that kind of a
Yeah.
misconception or kind of a sticking point with the process that
Yeah.
kind
I've
of
had
gets
a,
some people stuck.
yep, exactly. I've had definitely multiple clients and people that I've worked through really struggle with that because it feels like you're invalidating what happened to a person by saying there's no villain, saying there's no victim, saying that it's not really about what they did to you. It's about how you processed what they did to you. And that can be very difficult because people want to look at it and say, well, this is wrong. So this needs to be acknowledged in order to heal. And I'm not saying that a person's actions or behaviors that hurt you is okay, but we can't change another human. We can't, you can't get another human to say sorry. You can't get another human to validate your pain. You can't get another human to validate what they've done to you, no matter how logical it seems. So we spend all this energy villainizing, and it keeps us trapped within ourselves because the only person that we can walk through a painful situation is ourselves. And so, what feels disempowering because of the perceived invalidation of our pain is actually empowering because it's saying, no matter what anyone's done to you, you don't have to wait for a sorry. You don't have to wait for an acknowledgement. You don't have to wait for someone to say that was wrong. You get to be able to recognize that it was wrong. And now what do we do with it? How do we take care of ourselves in the midst of it? People are so busy in blame and so busy in villainizing that they never come back to themselves. And we've talked about that in the past with like the remote control exercise and blame. But it's so important to come back and take care of you first and what happened to you second.
Yeah, I totally get the empowering part. You know, I thought the solution for my healing was outside of me.
Yes, exactly.
And the pressure that creates?
So much pressure because,
Wow.
and it's very actually terrifying because it's contingent on others. And if
Yes.
and most people that hurt people, especially hurt people badly or intentionally even, they're not probably going to say sorry. They're probably not going to acknowledge it.
Right.
So
Right.
now you're just stuck. Now you're just stuck with that big pain ball that they justifiably and logically created by their actions. But now we're just stuck with it because we have nowhere to displace it because they're not going to receive it or acknowledge it. I know some people will, but not all people will.
Right.
So that's terrifying. Now you just sit with that pain and you can never get rid of it because it's contingent on naming the villain repenting for me to be okay.
Well, and for me, since I didn't have an obvious like person to blame
Yeah.
aside from myself,
Yeah.
I I I don't even know what and the fact that what probably drove me mad more than anything is I don't even know what outside of me is going to help me.
Yeah, that's true.
There's
It might
something
be actually comforting to have the one person that hurt you versus just everything, like
random, like I don't know. So it's like,
finances,
well,
success,
for me, I was
anything.
like, do I need to find the right counselor or consultant or
Yes,
therapist, or
yes,
do I need to find the right methodology or the right this or the
yes.
right that or read the right book? Or it was just, and it's overwhelming. Like there was so much. And
Yeah. I didn't even think about that, but that's so true.
yeah, I mean, but either way is extraordinarily difficult if you think the
Hmm.
answer to your pain
Yeah.
is outside of you.
Yeah, that's good.
And it triggers people to no end if I'll kind of bring in there, but the solution is within you.
Yeah.
It's not outside of you. And it sounds so cruel at first. They're like,
It
what
does.
do
I
you
know.
mean it's
I
inside
feel
of me?
bad
Like,
saying it too.
but
Exactly.
yet at the same time, but I'm like, but that's a good thing. Because
It
guess
is a
who
good
controls
thing.
this?
Yes.
You have 100% control over how much compassion you give your heart.
Yes.
That is 100% on you. You
Yeah.
control it, which I guess if you want to be stuck in blame and things like that, which is a big fallback in a trigger, that is disempowering because you'd rather
Yep. Yeah,
blame someone else.
exactly.
But really the reality is it is empowering to not have to depend on,
Yeah.
something else external. And I think in a lot of Christian ways, and I think I was probably this way too, of, I wanted God to move in the external to
Yep.
like pray the right prayer or the right
Yeah.
thing or the right person pray over me.
Yep.
And it's interesting because as I kind of walk through this from a faith standpoint, I recognize that, the Bible kind of tells me that God is within me.
Exactly.
So I don't have to run around the world to find him.
Hmm.
If I could just be with me, which means that I have to first be with my uncomfortable emotions and feelings,
Yeah.
I comfort those, and then I can be with me, and then I can
Exactly.
also be with God in some sort of a weird kind of,
Yeah.
well,
No,
it's weird
definitely.
because it's not the way we normally think about it. Like I got to
Yeah.
go to church to be with God. I got to go.
Yeah.
It's like, well,
No,
no.
I love that because it also centers more around who God is when we're abiding in Him. We're connected to ourselves, we're connected with God within, we're connected to who He is. We're in relationship and connection with Him. When we're trying to have God do something outside of ourselves, we're more connected with what He's doing or not doing. And that's going to be a very unstable relationship with God if our whole relationship is based on him saving us, him fixing things, him changing things.
Yeah.
Doesn't mean that he doesn't do that for us.
Because
He
his
does it
ways are
from
not our ways.
within
He's not going
out.
to do it. He's not
Oh,
going to do
no.
it the way we
Yeah,
want. He's never done.
exactly. No,
Yeah.
and we're going to draw our conclusions that God
Yeah.
doesn't love me because I'm not connected to him. I'm connected with what he does.
Yeah. I mean, I just think about, I've been rewatching the Chosen series and just like what the people were expecting from the Messiah versus what they got. It's like his ways are not our
Very
ways.
different.
Yeah, he shows up
Exactly.
differently. And
Yeah. And then you
yeah,
can see how those pains would block our connection with them. So now we're
yeah,
just frantically trying to get God to do something outside of us
yeah.
versus inside of us.
One of the things I found with this whole concept of the victim villain thing, this one really seems to help people. And I would say, and you've said this, I mean, you said this, and this really helped me, is you say that it's not fair that the villain, whoever the villain is in your
Mhm.
story, whoever it is, or it might not even be a person. It could be a
Circumstance or, yeah.
concept. It could
Hmm.
be a political party. It could be
Yeah.
a sports team.
Yeah. No,
I
really,
mean,
it could.
yeah, we're back in football season now, so
Yep.
that's
There's a lot of villains in there.
yep, a lot of villains. That play calling. Oof. Anyway, but that play caller, he really screwed up. But it's not fair. You'd say that's not fair that that villain gets all the attention. It's not
Exactly.
fair to your
So
heart,
much attention for
right?
years and years and years, that all of our affection, even if it's negative affection, negative attention, they get all the attention. And the person that has had a violation or had pain from that person doesn't get the attention and the connection that they need.
Yeah. And when I say that to people, that is like such a compassionate way of saying it. It's just not fair that your heart is sitting here
Mhm.
hurting and you're
Yeah.
putting all that energy over there.
Yeah.
That I've seen open people's eyes
I
time
think
and
so
time
too.
again.
Yep,
Yeah.
exactly. Because it's actually taking it's I think it's bypassing the feeling of it being invalidated by saying it's not about the person and saying
Yeah.
that you're too important to continue to blame the villain and have the villain get all the attention.
To get all that energy over there. Yep. Meanwhile,
So
your
much. And
heart,
I've seen people that like the villain's passed away. The
yeah.
villain is not been a part of their lives in 20 years, and they're
Hmm.
still giving all that attention and they're still neglecting their own heart.
Yep. Yeah. So that's a really empowering phrase. So if you can think about that yourself as you're
Yeah.
going through a big trigger
Yeah.
and somebody hurts you, that's going to help you a lot.
Yeah.
Another thing you say that's along these exact same lines that's very triggering and kind of a misconception or a sticking place. Um, you'll say things like one thing you say is the blamer is always responsible.
Yeah, that one does stick.
One stick. It's like, what do you mean I'm responsible? Well, you're responsible for your own heart.
Yeah, I know. I've done like workshops where that one is just like, very difficult
So
for
we didn't
the
want to lead the
blamer.
podcast with that one because it's
No,
like,
no, no, no. People are like, stop listening.
but remember, the blamer is always responsible is the exact same way of saying it's not fair
Yeah,
that the villain in your story is getting all the attention. It's the exact same
exactly.
thing.
And it's also the empowering piece that we're talking about too.
Yeah,
That if it's our responsibility, then we actually can be empowered to do something about it. If it's our responsibility, we can give ourselves the attention that we need instead of giving the villain the attention that we continue to give them.
totally. Yeah. Well, moving on to that was great, by the way. And I think that was worth the price of admission right there. So
Yeah.
that last conversation, but moving
Yeah.
on to the next one, this one is really important because for the compassion method to move forward, the first thing you have to be able to do is be aware that you're triggered. Now, we talked about some really extreme things up front where if you're in debilitating anxiety, depression, those type of things, like
Yeah.
you're triggered. You
Yeah.
know it.
Oh, 100%.
But guess what? Before that debilitating thing happened throughout your life, you were triggered a lot and didn't even know it.
Exactly.
And the reason it got to the debilitating part is because there was the buildup.
Yes. The buildup
So
and the suppression of the buildup. Yeah.
So I remember talking to before I met with you, Laura, I talked with a retired counselor, and I remember telling him that, I had never dealt with anxiety before. And he started laughing. He's like, he's like laughing. He's like, I'm like, what's so funny? He's like, yeah, right. Yeah. It's like you just weren't aware.
You just
Okay.
weren't aware of it. Exactly. I know a lot of times people, once again, like you said, it gets to that like peak anxiety, peak depression. We're like, oh, I experienced anxiety or depression, but you're exactly right. All the way down to where we became, I mean, before we became cognitive, but all the way down to 2, 3, 4 years old, we've experienced anxiety. We felt
Oh,
depression. We
absolutely.
felt those things. We just didn't know the name of it and we didn't know how to feel it. We didn't know how to walk through it, but it's been there all along.
And we engaged our protectors, the things we
Mm-hmm.
had built to take care of it that didn't really take care
Exactly.
of it, but
No,
it took our
medicated
mind
it,
off
but
it.
exactly.
And we engage those. And I sometimes jokingly say, not so jokingly, that if we're fortunate, our protectors will eventually fail us
Yes, exactly. And then
and
we
that
will
we
need to
have to deal
actually
with
get the
it.
true need met.
Yeah, true
Exactly.
need
And
met.
that really is what, anxiety attacks, things like that are. It's
Yep.
your system failing so
The
you can actually
protectors
get the
broke
help
down.
that you need. Exactly.
Yeah. So what some will say that are, I guess, in denial about being triggered, they'll say,
I know I have had people say I've never been triggered before too.
yeah, I'm not triggered. I'm just really passionate.
Yes.
I'm just really
Yeah.
passionate.
Especially real like strong personalities that their fight, flight, freeze, or fawn is primarily fight. And they have a lot of passion and a lot of conviction, and they are passionate about justice and a passion about, things being right. And so, like, when you see that passion, it can be deceiving because it can feel like it's not a trigger, it's just passion.
So delineate between the two, between a
Yeah.
trigger and just being passionate about something.
Yep. So one of the things I say is like one clear way of knowing that you're not triggered is you're okay. You're clear minded, you're tender hearted, you're at peace. And you can be passionate from a clear mind, from a tender heart, and being at peace. When we're frantic, when we're in blame, when we are feeling helpless, when we're feeling like we have to fight for something, when we feel like nobody else understands, when our brain feels foggy, when we feel tough towards situations and people, those are indicators that our passion is connected to a trigger. So your internal world, your emotions are going to tell you if your action is passionate or triggered. And I think sometimes it's not as clear of a separation. I think sometimes we are passionate and we're triggered at the same time, and they can actually be happening simultaneously.
Hmm. Yeah, I had a minor victory recently. I was working with a vendor and I had to address a sticky situation, and I had to be direct, kind of blunt.
Yeah.
And I was very cautious because I'm like, I don't want to do this from a triggered place.
Yeah.
And, you know, whereas maybe 5, 6 years ago, I would have been 95% triggered when I had the conversation. This time I feel like I was only about 30% triggered.
So
So
that means
after the
you're more in
conversation,
your sophisticated brain.
totally, I was passionately
Yes.
blunt and direct, but I did not feel after the conversation I had to apologize. Because
No,
in the
I
past, I
like
would have
that.
felt like, yeah, I mean, obviously I have a point here, but I handled it like a you know
Hmm.
what. So I need to go
Yep.
back and apologize. And after this one, I was like, you know, I was blunt, I was direct. I was a little triggered. I know that I was a little bit not at
Yep.
peace, you know,
Yeah.
it's
Yeah,
we're all a working
exactly. It's
process.
going to
That's
be mixed together a little bit, and that's what makes it
yeah.
hard to differentiate. But you knew, I like that. You didn't
But
feel
I
like you
wanted to
had
give
to
myself a high
apologize.
five afterwards. I
Yeah,
was
no,
like
that's
so thrilled.
huge.
Yeah.
No, and direct communication is not negative at all. It's our perception that if we're direct or we're passionate, that we're actually triggered. But if you are, for the most part, not in a triggered state, clear-minded, tenderhearted, at peace, and you directly say what you need to say, that's actually helpful for the other person. It's not hurting another person, it's helping another person.
Yeah. And maybe that other person would say, you know, no, actually, you were a jerk, you know, whatever. I'm like, well, if you think I was a jerk now, you should have seen me 5 years ago. you, you
You're
won't
just
be using the
lucky.
word jerk. It's kind of like, what level of nasty word are you going to use to describe me? You know, it's like, it would have been a worse word before, you know,
Yeah.
or you would have been
And
triggered for
yeah.
more days yourself after the
Yeah.
conversation. But
And
uh,
another way you can kind of tell is you're more curious with the situation. You're passionate about it, but you're also curious with it. Curiosity is a really strong indicator that we're not in a triggered state.
and when you say curious, you're talking about asking yourself, like, why does this bother me so bad?
Exactly. Curious with yourself. And
Yeah.
then it could potentially lead to curiosity with the person you're engaging with, but it starts with curiosity with yourself. Why does this feel so big to me? Why am I so passionate about this? And when passion is only connected to the knowledge of good and evil, and it's only connected to good and bad, we've lost relationship with ourselves and we've lost relationship with the person we're engaging with, because now we're not passionate about ourselves or about the other person. We're passionate about good or evil.
Hmm.
And so when passion is connected to good and evil, it's always going to be connected to shame. And so when we come step outside of, this isn't about it being right or wrong, this is about how it's connecting to me and how it's making me feel and how it's connecting to the other person and how it's making them feel, then all of a sudden now we're engaging on the real level versus just making it about good or bad.
Yeah. So I think a misconception someone could easily have about this is that you become a pacifist.
Yes, exactly. And you never have any emotions and you're always neutral and you're just going with the flow and you don't ever blame anyone and you never, care about what's going on outside of yourself. But it's not true at all. You
Nope.
actually care greater because you're less distracted by your wound, that you can actually be proactive because your wound is no longer driving your passion. Your true self is driving your passion.
Yeah. I mean, in Christian circles, the one you hear a lot is, you know, when Jesus turned over the tables of the money changers and cleared out the temple,
Yeah.
you know, and I'm like, but hey, here's the deal. You can do that and not be triggered in a way that leads to sin, obviously, because
Exactly.
Jesus did it.
Obviously, because he
Yeah.
didn't sin in it. Exactly.
So you can be very passionate
Yeah.
about righteousness,
Yeah.
about even about justice, about all those things. But when it's coming from a place of who you are, your true self,
Yeah.
versus you're coming from a place of pain, which is why I
Mhm.
believe the Bible says man's anger does not bring about the righteous life God desires. But I think that's largely because man's anger is primarily coming from our pain.
Exactly. And it's going to be against, not for.
Yeah.
Because I believe even when Jesus was saying that, it was actually for their hearts to turn towards God, not because they were bad and he was showing them how
Right.
bad they were. It
Shaming
wasn't
them.
against them, it was
Right.
for God, it was for them, it was for him.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely.
Yeah, that's a good indicator, just like curiosity. Are you doing it against or for? We get so
Oh, yeah.
preoccupied with our passions that, like, for example, I've worked with people that, with girls that have been trafficked before, people get so passionate about the problem that they're actually not doing it for the girls that are going through that, or people that are going through it anymore. They're doing it for their wound. They're doing it because they're passionate about stopping
Yeah.
the problem, but they're not doing it for the solution.
Which is also, I think that could be applied to a lot of people that go into help,
Yes.
help
Any type of
businesses, help
helping. Yep.
ministries,
Exactly.
you know.
We're so busy trying to stop the bad, the external, that we don't actually take care of the person that we're actually fighting for, that we're actually passionate about.
It's why so many social workers burn out, so many
Yep.
pastors burn out,
Yep. Because
they're,
again, you're trying to get your external world to be okay so you can be okay. Get rid of all the bad people in the world so we can feel okay. But
yeah.
that's never, one, never going to happen. And two, wasted energy. Because if
Hmm.
we actually built ourselves up and built up those that we're trying to help, the bad would not have as much of a negative impact on the person or ourselves.
Well, it goes back to the empowering thing. It's very disempowering if you think if you're in your role where you're meeting with people one on one and you're
Yeah.
and if your sense of self-worth and value and your ability to be okay is based on how well the person you're meeting with is
Yeah.
performing,
Yeah.
yeah, I mean
Yeah.
that,
That would be miserable. I wouldn't be doing this. It's 10 years later, 11 years later. I wouldn't be doing this
yeah,
right now if that
no.
was the case.
And one of the ways, Laura, that I know that I obviously I know it from experiential, but one of the other ways that I know, if I was just an outside observer, when I look at through the years, how many people you meet with one on one, like you meet with a lot more people one on one than a typical person in your arena.
Yeah. I do a little less now, but for years there, I mean, I was working full time doing it, which is like 3 times the amount as most
Well,
people
and it's
do.
been less exhausting because your well-being wasn't wrapped up in how well they were doing.
No. And
Yeah.
I don't feel that much different now. I have different, like, you know, things that I'm wanting to focus on. So I meet with people less, but I never stopped meeting with people less because I was burned out, because it was too much, because they were too much, because I wasn't okay. The reason why I stopped meeting with people as much is because I wanted to actually start, developing other parts of the compassion method and
Well,
developing and doing other things.
how to it was more about how to multiply. Yeah.
Exactly. So
Yeah.
it was changed. My vision changed,
It's
but it
more,
wasn't
I would
because I
say
was burnt out.
you're moving more towards discipleship. You are moving more towards training other
Yes,
people to go and
exactly. Yes. And I'm passionate about it. I'm enjoying it and it's exciting, but it's also, I still enjoy meeting with people one on one and I
yeah.
still enjoy being able to connect with people. So it's definitely not from burnout. It's from wanting to be able to have different focuses.
Yeah. Well, I know for me in my business, as the business has grown, I don't meet with as many clients anymore, but
Mm-hmm.
I still do meet with some. And oh my gosh, that helps me help the rest of the people that I'm
Mm-hmm.
trying to train how to
Yep.
do this
Yes. No,
because
I feel like it's
I'm
good to
learning new
stay in
things. I'm
it.
still
Yep.
learning. I'm still learning.
Exactly.
Like, oh,
Yep.
this is a better way to
Yeah.
explain this.
Yep.
And I'm like, I can't believe I was asking you guys to do it that way because that way is really hard. So
Yeah.
now I'm
And you don't
gonna,
know until you're actually doing
yeah, then
it.
I
So
go
it's
out and
good to stay
actually try and
relevant.
do it. I'm like, oh, that was a dumb idea I had, but anyway. So,
Yeah, no, I like that.
one of the other misconceptions, and I struggle with this one too, is that, after I engage this for a while, I just, we're kind of on the opposite of the person that doesn't think that they have ever triggered. But this is a person that thinks that I should never trigger anymore because I've engaged this process.
Yes. Yeah, that's
And
common.
a lot of shame that comes when guess what? It still happens.
Yep.
Um, maybe just speak to that a little bit.
Yeah, I've used the example multiple times of, like, you put your hand on a hot surface and your brain didn't trigger you that was hot surface, you'd actually melt your hand off. And so that trigger is actually so helpful to us because it's actually helping us all along the way, So triggers are actually, like I've said before, opportunities. But then also, we are exploring different parts of our hearts that have experienced different levels of pain. And a lot of times when you go get a deeper connection with yourself, which in turn usually means you're going to have a deeper connection with your wounds, you may even have even more triggers for a period of time as you're facing that, because triggers come from a wound, and they come from a wound that hasn't been comforted and cared for. And so being able to recognize that triggers are, one, not bad, two, they're an opportunity, and three, you're going to be triggered for the rest of your life. Just like every single human has experienced pain, every single human is going to have triggers and reactions for the rest of your life. The difference is, as you become more, go through the compassion method and you heal and you grow, is you get triggered usually less often, and usually don't get triggered as big as you used to. But if you do get triggered big, or if you do start feeling like you get triggered more often, opportunity to connect with yourself. It's a check engine light. It's an indicator. And so healthy actually means you're being triggered.
You're probably not getting triggered more. You're probably just more aware.
That's true too. I know some people are like, the people that have said like, I've never been triggered, and then they recognize what their body, their mind, their heart feels like in a trigger. They'll come back and be like,
triggered me.
I'm getting triggered every single second. But it's just like you said, you're just more aware of it.
Yeah, just have them go to the DMV every day or something. No,
I know. That's a good homework assignment. You just sit in the DMV.
Oh, no, there's somebody that works at the DMV. It's just a stereotype. We are perpetuating a stereotype that the DMV is not a pleasant experience, and that's not necessarily the case. But
no, and they've actually gotten a lot better. I just went to the DMV a couple days ago with my daughter, and I was like, they're really making this a more efficient process.
There you go. There you go.
We still waited for 30 minutes, but that's okay.
One of the things I've recognized on my triggers, and this was something else, if anyone listening has engaged this for a while, is how quickly I recover.
Yeah. So that's good.
A week or so ago, my wife and I had a triggered experience together. We shared a triggered experience together.
Aww,
and afterwards,
like I felt sharing a meal.
Afterwards, I felt like, I'm such a failure. I'm like, I'm so stupid. I know better than this. I know this process. I know what happened. It's like I walked right into the trap. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
But I was like, hey, wait a second. How cool is it that like just a few minutes later, I recognized that?
Exactly.
Like there'd be times where that would go on. If that, 10 years ago, that would have happened and I wouldn't have even known.
Mm-hmm.
I'd have been like, well, I was dumb, but I wouldn't have had any idea. I'd have been hung up on why I was right.
Whatever it was. Argument. Yeah. And some people have fights for weeks, days, and weeks and years because of that.
Interestingly, I was right in this argument.
Okay? Of course.
Whereas this time I was able to let being right go and be like, good. Yeah, of course I was right.
And I'm curious. Yeah, exactly.
Of course I was right, but really I didn't need to act like that, whereas before I might have been more just hung up on why I was right.
Yeah, exactly.
Did you kidding feel though, too, a little bit?
Yeah, I know. I know it makes you laugh.
I was probably partially right.
Yes, but it is funny how important being right can be in those moments of trigger.
Yeah, they're big.
Because they are big. Because we're trying to justify our pain instead of taking care of our pain. If I can be right, I can ignore my pain. If I'm wrong, I have to face my pain. But I'm curious, did you feel like you had quicker recovery? Do you feel like that quicker recovery helped you have a quicker connection or reconnection time? Did the recovery lead to reconnection? That's what I'm trying to say.
With myself, yes.
Yes.
The reconnection with my wife had to wait until she worked through the process herself.
And that's something that you can't control.
Because you can't connect with a triggered person.
No, it's like oil and water. Yeah. No, that makes sense though.
So but our connection came around
but you were in a position for reconnection. I like what you said. You can't, just because you've recovered doesn't mean that the other person can recover and reconnect in the same way you do. But you were in a position of reconnection because you were able to recover. That means that your heart was more open. When she was able to take care of her trigger and come back to you, you were ready. You were prepared.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And knowing the process obviously too gives you so much more empathy and compassion for other people.
Yes,
because it helps me. It helps me turn the blame off. There was a scenario I heard just recently. where this this family member of this person did something really hurtful to this other person. And man, I remember the old me would have been so judgmental. I would have been
Mhm.
like, but then I was kind of like, man, there's a reason why she reacted that way. There just is.
Exactly.
Like
There
she's
is.
hurting. I've met this person before. This is not who she is.
Exactly.
She is so giving and caring,
Yeah.
and she has laid down her life in so many ways for this family member that, she was hurtful towards. And I'm like, whereas before, man, I know the
Mm.
judgment would have just been
Oh,
like, oh,
yeah.
what a wicked woman. But it's like,
Yeah.
no way. It's
Nope, I
just
love
pain.
that. I love how we can be able to see people more clearly and see past what they did. Doesn't mean you don't acknowledge it, but you see that you recognize what they did mattered, but they mattered more.
Right. Right. Well, then you recognize that, hey, I've done that stuff too.
I know we
You
all
know?
have, it may
Yeah.
come in a different package, but we've all done
Yeah. You just haven't done it for like 30 years, but the rest of us do it on a very routine
it.
basis. Anyway.
Exactly.
So kind of the last misconception, I think, and I think this probably comes out in certain ways. Different people were raised differently, but if you were raised kind of like I was, to be very self motivated and to be very independent, all this
Maybe over
folk
responsible.
over responsible for other people's stuff, but all of this kind of focusing on yourself,
Mm,
because like, you're supposed to give yourself for others, right? So all
yeah.
this focusing on yourself seems kind of selfish at times.
Yeah. No, I've
Um,
definitely seen that. You got that's just selfish to give yourself love, give yourself compassion.
right. So yeah, speak to that.
Yeah. So it comes down to that scripture, do unto others as you'd want them to do towards you. And if we don't know how to treat ourselves and we don't know how to love ourselves, our love for others is not going to be as authentic and as rich and as deep and actually truly sacrificial. We think we're being sacrificial when we suppress our own needs and we don't love ourselves and give all of our attention to other people. But that type of love is usually circumstantial. It's based on a person, gives me the feeling that I'm doing good. It gives me the feeling of like, I'm, selfless. But selfless people don't know how to love. Those that
Hmm.
have self compassion and self connection know how to truly love because they know how to love themselves. And if you don't know how to love yourself, you will not be able to love others to the fullness that we are capable of loving.
Yeah. And if all you do on focus on others is going to be very exhausting, because
Exactly.
but that love for yourself is, it's a ever running fountain,
Yeah. And
because
it's a,
love doesn't
yes.
deplete.
Nope, it
Love does not
doesn't.
deplete.
Nope, it is not, it's limitless.
It's limitless.
But when we don't love ourselves and we try to love other people, there's limits.
Yeah. So Proverbs 4:23, I return to that a lot when I'm talking to people about this process, about above all else, guard your heart,
Yeah.
take care of your heart, for it is the wellspring of life.
Yeah.
Everything flows through your heart.
Yeah.
So focus on that
Yeah.
above all else.
Yeah.
Above all else.
Exactly.
It's such a
So
cool,
important.
to me, it's such a cool side effect of
Mm-hmm.
the fact that if you take care of yourself well,
Yeah.
as a side effect, you are going to take care of everybody in
You
your
will.
sphere of influence
Yeah.
really, really well.
Yes.
And
And
you're
if
not
the,
going to
yeah.
enable them.
Nope.
Yep.
Exactly.
You won't fall for that stuff, because that ain't
No.
going to work. You're not going to
No,
enable them.
exactly.
You may not always do and jump to the things that they want you to jump to,
Yeah.
but you will, in fact, have a much higher probability of giving them exactly what they need
Mm-hmm. I
if you are
agree.
full yourself and you don't need
Yes.
them to
Mm-hmm.
like you or all those other
Mm-hmm.
things.
All the things that usually motivates our love that actually is selfish love. So much
Yes.
selfless love is actually more selfish than we realize.
Yeah, that's 100%. It's 100%. Well, great. We addressed some really, I think, great topics here, and some of the areas where we've both seen people kind of get stuck in this
Definitely.
process.
Yeah.
Yeah. And if there's any one of these areas that you need to spend a little more time with, or you have questions on, you can definitely
Yeah.
feel free to engage us through questions on the website, which, by the way, we revamped the website.
Ooh,
So go
that's
check
good.
out triggeredandtrue.com and you can see the kind of revamped website. And then also, if you're looking for more information on Laura or how to work with Laura or engage the materials more, episode number 44 does a really great job of, how can you go deeper with the compassion method, just kind of laying out some of the resources that you have out there, Laura. So,
Yeah. Yeah, that's
yeah.
great.
Yeah. So, well, thank you everyone for listening. Until next time, take care of yourselves. Goodbye.